Hi there, it's Dave Munday here, Lead Professional Officer with Unite the Union in the health sector. I lead on mental health. Hello to those that haven't seen or met me before. I'm just going to share a quick video about stuff that I got up to last week. I'm wondering whether this will be something that I'll do on a more regular basis. I think it's helpful in terms of members seeing the activity that I'm involved with and the work that I'm doing on their behalf. But also it does help because it means that I can do a little bit less writing than I normally would want to do. So you can just get a flavour of what I've been up to without me having to type it all up and do it that way. Hopefully it's of interest. Do give me some feedback. If you think it's not, then tell me and then I'll stop doing it. Today it's March the 25th, Monday morning, just arrived in London, got a really busy week ahead, but actually had a really busy week last week, lots of stuff going on. Lots of activity and meetings that hopefully have been representing members' views and campaigning on the issues that they feel passionate about. Just to go through the days, on Monday I was involved in just reviewing the first 1001 Critical Days infographics again. We've been asked about organisations endorsing this work. Uniting Health was involved in its formation, so we responded to the consultation that happened and we fed back our members' views about the information contained in it. And I also went to an event where lots of different people from lots of different organisations and professions fed back in person. I think the new resources are really helpful and we've been asked whether organisations will endorse them. I asked our Mental Health Nursing Association members, the national committees, whether they were happy to endorse, and pleased to say that the feedback that we had from them was that yes they are, so our name will be appearing and our logos on those. Also did some work reviewing some papers that have been sent in for the NHS long-term plan meeting that happened on the Tuesday, but I'll speak about that in a few seconds. Going on to Tuesday, met with Steve Ford, who is the Nursing Times editor. I've worked with Steve quite a few times over the last year or so, primarily, well, before in his role as one of the journalists, senior reporters on the title, but he more recently has become the editor of the publication. And it's one of those where I've done lots of work with Steve on social media and on phone, but I'd never actually got to meet him in person. So it was great to meet him, especially because the week before it was the CNO England's conference, so I could get a real flavour of what happened at that event beyond the reporting and the tweets that came out of it. And obviously had the opportunity to have conversations about whether any of the stuff at the conference was sort of like focused on non-hospital, non-acute nurses, and obviously important to think about the way that mental health nurses were represented and community nurses at the event. Also to think about the comment that Matt Hancock made, which seems completely ridiculous in terms of saying that nurses still have to stand up when doctors enter the room. I'm not aware of that happening anywhere in the country as of today, but obviously if you know, do let me know, because it'd be good to challenge that kind of weird behaviour that I'm sure no one would kind of feel is appropriate, and do wonder why Matt kind of made that comment at such an important event. And there's a really good blog that Andy Cowper's done from Health Service Journal that might question kind of his behaviour at that event. Also on Tuesday I attended the NHS long-term plan Nurses and Midwife Future Clinical Workforce group. Now this is a group that's been created to help the NHS England and NHS Improvement to put together the two workforce plans that they're currently working on. One that will be launched in the next few weeks, and that will be the plan for 2019-20, and then something for later in the year that will be focused on the longer term of the NHS long-term plan, which obviously is over the next 10 years. It's really good to be involved in that because obviously it is such an important subject. We all know that one of the major problems facing the NHS at the moment is workforce in England, and it's such an imperative that we get this sorted. I'm always sort of talking about the cuts to mental health nursing, where we've seen thousands of mental health nurses lost since 2010. And also to the profession that I belong to, health visitors, health visiting, where we've seen 1 in 4 health visitors cut in the last nearly 3 years. Really worrying situation, and it's good to hear in terms of the long-term plan some of the ideas that they've got to address that. One of the things that I've been really key to stress is the importance that we get it right for 1920 and don't miss the opportunity that we've got now to make a difference. Just as an example, we had statements last year about increasing the number of clinical placements. There was money assigned to that, but as far as I'm aware, none of that money was spent to increase clinical placements. The other one, in terms of mental health nursing and learning disability nursing, was we were promised the golden handshakes for people, and again that seems to have been something that's created that just hasn't had any impact whatsoever. And obviously last year I wrote to the Minister to ask him about that, and the reassurances that he gave kind of unsurprisingly weren't very reassuring. The other thing that I've been repeatedly raising is the issue of the Nurse First programme that was launched. And the first year that had a pilot, they were looking at 40 nurses being brought into the 40 people being brought into the nursing profession. And again, where has that gone? So hopefully what I'm expecting in the long-term plan that's published in the next few weeks is real concrete solutions that will be used this year and won't be kind of kicking the can further down the road, because we've seen that happen much too often. And one of the examples of that I've referenced quite a few times has been the work that happened from the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Mental Health, where I challenged Matt Hancock about mental health nurse numbers, and he said that there would be some comfort in the long-term plan in terms of increasing mental health nurse numbers, and obviously we've not seen that because it has been promised in the workforce plan that will be coming out soon. After that, I travelled up to Edinburgh and I met up with a colleague up there, Gavin Fergie, who is another lead professional officer at Unite. He's based up in Edinburgh, and we went to the NMC Fitness to Practice event that was organised, looking at the new approach that they're focused on at the moment. It sounds really positive in terms of the work that they're doing on that. We know that fitness to practice is an unbelievably scary process for all the nurses and midwives and specialist community public health nurses that have to go through it, and hopefully the new approach that the NMC is trialling will reduce that and also make it more appropriate and better for people that have raised complaints in terms of care that they or loved ones may have received. We've already done a meeting with the NMC from Unite as a team, looking at the contextual work that's going on. So that's looking not at a situation in its kind of on its own, but looking at all the situation that was around it. And obviously, as trade union reps, we always want to check that people are getting fair hearings and not just looking at individual aspects of care, but looking at the situation, the scenario, the environment that care was delivered in, and why things went wrong. Obviously, one of the big important features of any work like that is to make sure that it doesn't go wrong again. And we saw a really good video at last week's event that showed someone speaking whose partner had died due to the care that they'd received, kind of vocalising that themselves about the importance of them feeling that this would never happen again. And it's really important that we kind of pursue that work. Just to say, if you're interested in getting a much better description of it, the NMC are running a webinar on Thursday the 4th of April at 4 p.m. And there's information on their Twitter feed, so if you just Google NMC News, you will be able to find the details on how to register for that event. On Thursday, after I'd travelled back from Edinburgh, I attended the Mind Blue Light programme celebration event. This is part of the work that I do with our ambulance members, and the Mind Blue Light programme was something that was set up a few years ago, and it was done through the money that was got from banks for their LIBOR irregularities, the fines that were received, and it's a programme that looked at making sure that our blue light personnel, so for example our ambulance personnel, people that work in the Coast Guard, people that work for the fire service, police, etc., would get really good support around their own mental health. And it's good in terms of what we've seen happen since the programme was instigated. The kind of numbers that we're saying before the programme started, I think it was about a third of staff felt able to talk to their own employer in blue light services about their mental health. As we get to the end of the programme, that's increased to about 2/3 of workers are happy, comfortable to do that. And I think that's a great testament to the work that's been led by Mind and all the thousands of people that have been involved in it. What's really sad about it is the fact that the programme has come to an end, or is coming to the end in the next few weeks, because the fine money has now run out. And it is interesting really that the government is talking at the moment about prioritising workers' mental health, including people like doctors and other NHS professionals, but in fact the system that has already been set up isn't getting recurrent funding to do that. The message at the last week's event was upbeat, hoping that the work would continue, and Mind's commitment that if anyone needed support to continue the work, that they would do their best to do that, and fair play to Mind for doing that. But obviously concerning that, the money has now dried up, and it won't be something that is centrally funded. There's lots of other things happening last week that I had very little involvement in. So one of them you probably picked up on was Closing the Gap report was launched. That was done by the Health Foundation, the King's Fund and Nuffield Health. 160 odd pages I think it was, and I am hoping to have an in-depth read of it at some point this week. I've got hopefully at least one day of reading that I can get done this week, and that is a really strong report from the bits that I've seen, talking about the problems again that I referenced earlier around the NHS long-term plan, about the number of NHS professionals and the 100,000 plus people that we're missing in the NHS. So hopefully it is a really good adjunct to the conversations that were happening with the long-term plan, and it was great for me to see a lot of the messages that we're hearing through that group to be referenced and reflected in the report. It was also good that it mentioned mental health nursing a few times, but sadly only mentioned health visiting, my profession, where it was talking about stats and how health visitors are sometimes lumped in with nurses and midwives. So concerning that isn't an area that is discussed. And going back to the meeting I had with Steve Ford from Nursing Times, kind of talking about one of those issues about our chief nursing officers. At the moment we've got obviously chief nursing officer for England, Ruth May, recently put in position, and obviously she now spans NHS England and NHS Improvement. What's interesting for the community nurses out there is the responsibility that the Chief Nursing Officer at Public Health England has, Professor Viv Bennett. And that kind of bit about it'll be interesting to see the interplay that happens going forward and the kind of priority that both groups are given. And one of the things that we reflected on was the fact that Ruth is a full-time post, whereas the post that Viv has at Public Health England is a part-time post. And again, that kind of the symbolism of those two things. The other thing that came out at the end of last week was the Equality and Human Rights Commission have published their Human Rights Framework for Restraint, a much more manageable document to read, less than 20 pages, so something again that I'll be looking at and hopefully will feed into the report that I'll put into the next Mental Health Nursing Journal, which will be going to press in the next week or so. On that, one of the events that I didn't mention but I'm saving for the end was last week we had our regular Mental Health Nursing Journal editorial board. That's where we get our leading members from Mental Health Nursing Association together to talk about the upcoming journals, its content, how it's going, and how we make sure that it reflects the information and the work that we need to get out there and tell our members about. Really looking forward to our next journal, which is going to be a focus on art and mental health. It's one that's been in gestation for quite a long period of time, about a year now, and we've been picking up lots and lots of good authors, and hopefully it will be a good collection of articles in the next journal. Like I say, I'm really looking forward to reading that, but also talking about some of the other focus journals that we're going to be having over the next year or so, and there's some really good topics hopefully that we'll be covering. As always, if you've got any feedback about the journal, if you want to be an author, if you want to critique any of the information that we're sharing in it, please do get in touch. We're a very approachable journal, and hopefully we reflect that, especially in the different kind of styles of article that we have in the journal. One of my favourites is Inside the Mind, where we ask for different people to be interviewed from the world of mental health, and we've had some brilliant contributors recently. One of my favourites most recently was Natasha Devon, who is a mental health campaigner, and I think really typified a really good kind of Inside the Mind article, but all of them are of a really high calibre. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the journal is we're also having conversations about looking at doing a podcast of the journal, and one of our brilliant new members, Stephen McKenna, is looking at leading on that, and hopefully it'll be something that I can tell you about more in a future update. Hopefully this has been interesting and useful today. I don't want to go on too long because I know people will kind of switch off after a few minutes because there's so much to do out there, but hopefully it just gives a really good flavour of the work that I've been up to last week. This week there's quite a few exciting things to get involved in, and obviously if you want to get up to the minute updates from the work that I'm doing, then please do take a look at my Twitter feed. That's at David A. Munday, and Munday is spelled M-U-N-D-A-Y. Do follow me because it is a place that I share all the work that I'm up to for you as members, and hopefully it's also a way of you giving feedback and get involved in the conversation. Thanks for listening through nearly 17 minutes today, and hopefully see you quite soon. Thanks a lot. Cheers, bye.